Hello. Thanks for joining. We're just waiting for Mike Hutchinson to join. This is Oakland Rising Monday Meals, and today we're going to have Mike Hutchinson, who is the OUSD School Board Director for District 5, come and talk about us returning back to school in person and amidst COVID and all the complexity of what that looks like. So we're just waiting for Mike to join us. But while we're waiting, my name is Liz Huck. I'm the Executive Director for Oakland Rising. Oakland Rising is a collaborative of organizations here in Oakland that are building political power for those in the flatlands of East and West Oakland. And if you want to support Oakland Rising, you can go to oaklandrising.org. We'd love for you to participate in a survey that we have about our Monday meals, because we want to hear what you want to hear about. We have some ideas, but we want to see thoughts that you might be having about the series that we've been doing. And we've been hearing good feedback from folks, but we wanted to sort of quantify it and figure out what kind of work that we'll be doing, what kind of topics you all want us to cover, who do you want us to bring on. So if you all can fill out that survey, we'd really appreciate it. You can also go to oaklandrising.org to sign up for our e-blasts and our newsletters. And then you could also check out previous Monday meals by going to our blog on our website. And wanted to let you all know that tomorrow is the last day to vote for special election for California Assembly District 18. So you can do that. It's too late to register to vote for it, to get your vote by mail. But if you go to any of the polling sites, you can register on site and then get a provisional vote ballot. And because it's just one seat, you're just going to get the one seat. There's nothing that you're going to miss out on. And then we also have a follow-up election, which is for the recall, to recall Governor Newsom, which will be happening, I believe, September 14th. So if you just go ahead and combo 1, 2, the mail-in ballots, like mine here, you can send those in, and then we'll go from there. Don't see Mike has joined yet, so hopefully he will join soon. Let me just send him a text. He looks like he's having some tech issues. He's getting on now. So as you all know, it's really important for you all to vote on for the special election for Assembly District 18, as well as the recall vote. So make sure that you're telling your folks, because the Bay Area really does make an impact statewide. The 8018 district is for Oakland, San Leandro, and Alameda, but the recall vote is something that's statewide. So you can follow our sister organization, Oakland Rising Action, to find out more information on the flip side to that. But we just wanted to let you know that you need to vote for that, and to participate in that vote. So this is Monday Meals, and if you're still on, I'd love to hear what it is that you're doing for lunch today. We really do these Monday Meals so that It's a time where folks kind of get together at lunchtime and just kind of talk about what's going on in the town over lunch. And also want to just hear, because Monday Meals is really about how do we nourish ourselves? How do we nourish ourselves physically and emotionally and mentally, in all the ways that we embody. And so if you want to drop in the chat what you're having for lunch, if you have decided or not, or if you have eaten. I am having soup. It is one of my favorite soups. It is with an anchovy base, but you can make it without it. But I do it with the anchovy base soup, and it's from the radish, the young radish leaves. It's dried and reconstituted, and then put it in the soup with some soybean paste and mushroom, tofu, and some radish that is cooked together. And it's one of my favorites because it's a very country Korean country food, and so it's like a real comfort food to me. So I'm just going to get started and start talking about what's been happening, and maybe Mike can join us in a second. It looks like he's texting me. But kids are back in school, and throughout OUSD across this state. Hold on, let me just... So still having some technical difficulties with Mike, and he's going to join in just a second. So as you know, kids are back in school, and we're in the midst of a surge around Delta virus, the Delta COVID variant, and we have students who are about 40,000 students back at 30 or 40,000 students back in session, and we the issues around testing and what's the priorities, and how are we keeping our kids safe, and then also how are we keeping them safe when they need to keep the windows open, and we are in the midst of fire season. So there's a lot of issues there that are really pending and that folks are dealing with. Like myself, as a parent, I have a kid in OUSD and one in middle school, kids in school. I have kids in middle school and a kid in 5th grade, and my 5th grader has already been exposed 2 times and has to be on a modified quarantine, which means that they can go to school because they were masked and they weren't right next to the student for a long period of time, that they can go to school masked, but they can't participate in after-school programs. So that's been a little difficult. Here's Mike. I'm going to bring him up now. Wonder if that worked. Mike, you also might want to request to join if your invitation doesn't allow you to join. So Mike, if you can hear me, go ahead and request to join, because it looks like you're unable to join for some reason. So it's been difficult, as you can imagine, right? Just the process around it. And sometimes we get the tests. You only get tested if you've been exposed. And then if you're exposed and you get tested, the test results don't come out for at least a week, because there has been some confusion about the tests being administered improperly. So kids are receiving the rapid tests, the take-home tests that are being administered by some school administrators, and then they're given the other test, the PCR test, which then takes much longer to get the results. But the take-home tests, the rapid tests, aren't accurate. So it's been a little confusing and difficult to navigate as a parent. And, in the middle of my workday, having to go back and forth and shuttle my kids and finding out last minute what the process is. And so I wanted to talk to Mike about some things that he's trying to move with the school district. Okay, let's try again, Mike. Do, do, do. Hopefully this will work. Did that work? You can also request Mike to join me. Did that work, Mike? It's not working. Mike, are you able to request to join me? Because it seems like you're unable to accept my request. But what are some questions and concerns that you have about sending your kids back or about what's happening? If you've had the experience of, oh, here comes Mike on, let's try this. Oakland Public Education Network. Did that work, Mike? Hey, there we go.
Hey,
Yay, we figured it
are
out.
we working? Yeah, I had to resort to my laptop did not work. Uh,
Oh, yeah. So on IG Live, you have to be on your phone or on an iPad.
yes. Now I know, and I will remember that for next time.
I think we had the same issue last time, Mike.
I
But anyways,
probably I'm old.
it's all good. It's all good. Thanks for joining, though. Really appreciate you. I was just catching folks up. And so, this is Monday Meals. We always ask, like, what are you having for lunch? Again, let me introduce you, though. This is Mike Hutchinson. He is the OUSD School District Director for Board of Education Director for District 5. And welcome. And he's been, advocating for educational justice in Oakland for several years now, many, many years now. And so really appreciate you coming on to talk about this. So like this is Monday Meals, and so we ask like, what are you doing? What are you doing for lunch? What are you eating to nourish yourself? And are there other things that you're doing to nourish yourself besides eating well, if you're eating well? Looks like we're having technical difficulties. Oop. So let's try that one more time.
There we go. I'm sorry. I'm having all kinds of tech difficulties. So I heard that I took actually last week I was not eating well. I took the weekend to try to rest up and eat a lot better.
Yeah.
Um, but right now I'm having a coffee of lunch, so or a lunch of coffee. Either way, um, so it's a work in progress for me. Yes.
Okay, well then let me ask you this other question, kind of aside to that, which is, what are the ways in which you're caring for yourself? How do you And I don't like to use the word self-care because it feels very individualistic, but more about thinking about what are the ways that you're nourishing yourself so that you can show up for your community and for all of the people in your life that count on you.
Last week was one of the more draining weeks I remember ever having. And so
Mm,
extremely tired and just emotionally drained. Um,
mm,
so I took the weekend. I had 2 good nights worth of sleep, and it really recharged me. Um, but it's one of the things I'm still new to being a school board director, especially
mm,
the times been in lockdown in a pandemic, and
mm,
so I'm still trying to um, find a pattern that's going to be sustainable for me. So last week I definitely overdid it um,
mm.
on my body. Also, when I have a 9.5 hour Zoom meeting right in the middle of the week on top of everything else. Um, so at least this past week, just resting on the weekend worked. But I don't always have that luxury, so I'm gonna try to find a better pacing. And one of my nieces is now on a soccer team again, and so I'm gonna try to at least go to practice with them once or twice a week, and uh, that'll help me work it out. In my younger days, it was playing soccer, so I used to always work it out a few times a week. And
Hmm.
the hard part now is I haven't had the time, and the body starts to break down a little bit. So finding what can replace what I've used as my crutch most of my life to kind of work it out is I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, I hope you could get back out on that soccer field because that is like one of the best ways to stay sane and stay fit and stay in your body, right? Is to run and move um and it seems like folks are doing it safely these days. So I hope that your niece's team is really taking the precautions and that she's having a lot of fun with it. I hope she's having fun.
Yes, we make sure it's safe and definitely fun. And yes, I'm a big believer in contact sports as a good way to work.
Well, there's some folks that do a boxing class in San Antonio Park. You should check that out. But tell us about last week, that why it was so busy. I know it was crazy because we started school and it's just been a wild, wild couple weeks.
Yes, and a lot of it's going to continue bubbling to the top, and really this school year was going to be very difficult for us in OUSD. Um, uh, People were hoping that we would be coming out of the pandemic, but it was going to be kind of reopening our schools after mainly being shut down for a year and a half, and so it was going to be a very heavy lift. Um, and OUSD was not fully prepared to do that. Then we had the Delta variant come onto the scene just a few weeks or a couple of weeks before the start of the school year, and everything became much more serious, and the problems much more apparent. And so, what we've had in OUSD is over the last 18 months is really a failure to plan and prepare adequately for reopening. We've received roughly $300 million in COVID relief dollars, but that money wasn't put into action to prepare for this school year. And there's really two main areas that we needed to prepare for, besides just reopening our schools for the first time in a year and a half.
And you mean school buildings because actually schooling has been happening throughout the year last year, right? It was all virtual, but like
So,
our school buildings and like our kids accessing that.
and yes, and even a little more. We were open in the spring of last year in our hybrid phase of reopening, but
Right.
even most of the year in distance learning, it was not like any school year we had ever experienced before.
For sure.
And so there was always going to be this work that we were going to have to put in to shift back to a more traditional schooling model with in person, and that was going to be hard after this amount of time. But now we're really seeing that we were not prepared, and we do not have the proper testing and COVID protocols in place to
Mm-hmm.
keep schools as safe as possible and to really track what's going on in our schools in terms of COVID. And we did not prepare to put together a strong, independent, steady distance learning program to accommodate the families who were going to choose that.
Right. And so my understanding is that, you know, at first I was really kind of pissed off because I just assumed that when we, got back to school, that the best way to stop transmission is to stop anybody from, if you test positive, not to come to school. But you won't test positive until like you show symptoms. And to me, it was kind of like, well, why aren't we testing more regularly so that if you do have it, at least on the first day, like you don't get to come to school in person. But then I thought about it and I was like, 40,000 students and, the 20,000 administrators and, and school staffing and all of that. Like theoretically, even it sounds like a heavy lift, but it's also like even a bigger lift, like monetarily and then physically, like making that happen. So then sort of like relaxing into like, okay, so we're mitigating as opposed to prevention, right? And then it was like, okay, well, what if my kid does contract, does knock on wood, um, does get COVID and can't go to school for 10 days at the minimum, right? Not like they end up hospitalized and all of that stuff, but just at the minimum, they have to quarantine themselves. They don't have any schooling during those 10 days, right? And so, and then on the flip side to that is like, okay, well, then what if I just continued independent learning and then just did that? But then I hear there's like a wait list of 300 families. Families, that's not even students, that's 300 families because they might have multiple children. And then it was like, okay, well, then what's the other options, right? And so the option that I was provided was that then they would have to, she could go to modified quarantine, which is they can attend school, but they can't attend after school, which I pay for. So my kid has missed 4 weeks of aftercare, and that's about $400 out my door that I'm now going to pull her out of because I anticipate this is just going to happen over and over again. And no fault to any of the children or people who are showing up sick or positive, because we have a lot of families in our school district that are essential workers and have to be in the public space and cannot quarantine themselves. And so just the whole gamut of everything is so frustrating, right? It's like the navigation around it, the information around it, what's the next steps? And then I hear we go to a school board district meeting, and instead of talking about COVID response, we're talking about a raise for our superintendent. And not that she don't deserve it or, that that's where I'm going with this, but to not prioritize the moment, it's like, come on, y'all, read the room, right?
Yeah.
And so to hear that feels even more frustrating because it feels like we're back in the same place around the school board and the district on what our actual needs are
Well, it
and
was,
who designed this program because
well,
it
so for months I've been yelling behind closed doors and publicly that there is no plan for reopening. Um, I made a lot of people upset by saying that because I got pushback. Oh no, there really is a plan. You just don't know what it is, but there really is a plan. Now we see after 3 weeks of school, if there was a plan, the plan has failed. And so I would disagree with you. We have to be able to provide weekly testing at all of our school sites. As
Oh,
a as
yeah, for me, I was like, why aren't we doing daily testing? Because like everybody should be getting tested at the front door and then walking in with
but
with a negative test.
yeah, and really, with the incubation period, really twice a week would be the standard. But I've been pushing now for 3 weeks, actually 4 weeks, just to get a commitment to do weekly testing at every school site. For those of us in the community, we organized around I introduced a resolution at the school board, and we organized around that for 3 weeks. We had an online petition with 1,500 signatures, another petition with close to 500 signatures, community letters, support across the board. At last week's school board meeting, Director Davis introduced an amendment that totally gutted my resolution. They used that amendment. 5 school board members voted to substitute Director Davis's amendment with my resolution. And what they did is they voted to do testing once every 2 weeks if we can. And so when faced with broad-based community support of my resolution that we had been working on for weeks, the school board, 5 school board directors, Davis, Yee, Ng, Thompson, and Gonzalez, all voted to substitute my resolution with one that gutted all the language about providing weekly testing and are only committing to provide it once every 2 weeks in the most impacted zip codes. And that's really what we're facing, because we have to remember, if my resolution would have passed, it's not like we're going to be led away in handcuffs if we don't live up to the standards of that resolution. What it was really doing was at least setting a goal for the district to move towards. And when faced with that, the school board, first, they decided not to hold the school board meeting in person and to hold it on Zoom. And second, Director Davis introduced an amendment that then passed that totally gutted that resolution. And so, but I wanted, the flip side is I have put together a group of community organizations and community health centers. And when we've started meeting, they have been willing and able to help us raise our capacity for testing. And so one of the false narratives that most of the school board is telling us is that we can't do better than this, that we can't hire more people to help with testing, that we just don't have the capacity. And that's just not true. It is a lack of will, as we can see by the school board's vote. And kind of distance learning is the same as testing. We have money in our one-time dollars. I actually had a resolution at the last meeting that would have guaranteed families can return to their in-person school when they're ready to leave distance learning. That resolution didn't pass either. So our current school board is telling families you don't have a right to return to your in-person school when you're done with distance learning. And they're also telling families the best we can do is maybe provide COVID testing once every 2 weeks.
You know, and I mean, I think about it too, Mike, and it's like, you know, I really appreciate that context on the school board meeting. And then, but then there's also like a level up from that, right? It's like, OUSD is not in a bubble. You know, we live in a county that, you know, has a, you know, county board of education or Department of Education, right? And then we have this at the state level as well, right? I imagine that these are mandates to some degree coming down from the state and from the county about like what we can or cannot do, or what, you know, and also feeling like, you know, what are the ways in which the county health department is helping with any testing, and where are the gaps in what happened, right? Because it's like some planning happened here, and I'm so at a loss, because I'm like, it doesn't feel like you talked to any parents, didn't feel like you talked to any educators about like how this would happen. Because I also imagine like teachers going, okay, yes, you've kind of cornered parents into sending them back to school in person, because if you go with the distant learning option, then you lose your homeschool, the school that you choose of your choice. And then from there, you have folks talking about, okay, so then I don't want to lose that spot. Like, okay, so let's talk about it in the eye. Like for me, I don't want to lose my kid's spot because we've been at the school for 5 years, 7 years, because my older kid is 7th grade. So 8 years. So we've been there for that long. So I don't want my kid to have to go to a new school or, you know, lose their spot. But then, you know, if they do get sick, they don't have homeschool, they don't have anything to take home with them, because that to me is also additional work on the teacher, right? Because then the teacher has to supplement their entire curriculum in school with an off-site learning experience. And when I, for example, we had left the country for a little bit on a trip, extended trip, like they had independent learning. So it took like the teacher a week to just create a packet for them to have. And so like imagine doing that double to their own in classroom experience. So then there's like double work for the teachers. And then my understanding is that we didn't hire anybody for the independent learning.
No, no, we didn't hire anybody, period.
Yeah. Oh, because I thought there was like
No,
maybe a couple days before school started. I heard that they hired a few people or.
but I'm just, it wasn't just teachers for independent study. We didn't staff up at all. There's been no hiring at all to prepare for this reopening year. So I'm gonna go try to. There was a lot that I'm gonna try to unpack all of those questions here.
Sorry,
No,
I threw them all at you, Mike. I
no,
want you to like help me figure this out.
so I can't stress enough that this is a failure of leadership across the board and at every level. We should not be in the situation that we're in right now. And as this has started to become a more public issue in OUSD, as we've been on the media, as news has gotten out, it's not like I've heard from any other elected officials. So the only elected official I've heard from is Council Member Carol Fife in District 3. And I got one Facebook message by one county Board of Education member who suggested I email a couple of people. And so, you know, I'm low man on the totem pole as school board director, District 5. And so all of those other levels of government should be providing these services too. The city should be helping with testing and COVID response. Definitely the county, who has gotten CARES Act money also. And we also need more help from the state and even the federal government. What's happened is the state has put out guidelines, and OUSD staff, who have been the ones entirely running the COVID response. The school board has not been involved. I've been asking to be involved. I've been demanding to be involved, and I haven't even been allowed to attend a meeting to discuss it. So this is all being decided by a very small number of senior district staff in OUSD. They are taking what the state says is their guidelines, and they are implementing that as policy. The problem is guidelines are the bare minimum. They don't say this is the most you can do. They say this is the least you can do. And it's almost this race to the bottom. And so we have not done any more than the guidelines. Really this week, I need to start projecting this forward with solutions, but we need to have a clear understanding of how we got to this point. What we should have done is 6 months ago, as we knew we were coming to this reopening year, we should have raised our testing capacity. We should have stockpiled physical tests. We should have started hiring staff to do testing and train them. You don't have to have medical training to do COVID testing. We could train people in one day and send them out to COVID test, and we still haven't done that. It takes an investment and a commitment, and we have that money in our COVID relief dollars, which were specifically given to us to spend on these things. The same thing for our independent study distance learning. What we should have done as a district is spent money and staffed up for that program to have that capacity. The district said they were anticipating 5% of our students doing distance learning this year, which is roughly 1,700 students. We should have staffed up specifically for 1,700 students through all grades in independent study and had that as a self-contained program. Then if families from their school placement, from their in-person placement, opt for distance learning, they could just be transferred into there and their space held at their in-person school. If you would have held that space at the in-person school, it would have had the added benefit of lowering the class sizes for everyone else who's doing in-person. But see, that's not what the district did. The district didn't staff up distance learning, so we're looking to take some teachers away from in-person and kind of move them over and, robbing Peter to pay Paul and acting like we don't have extra resources that we could dedicate to this. And so the question really becomes, if we're receiving almost $300 million in COVID relief, why aren't we spending these dollars to get through this recovery year?
Yeah, yes, and it feels like this is the type of situation where I'd like to understand it, but more than understanding it, I want to know what's the path forward. Like,
Yeah.
what's the solution to this? Because, like, yeah. So I wonder what's the
So,
steps
so
forward? Like, what do we need to do now?
last week, we had this resolution at the school board meeting calling for weekly testing. But I also put together what at least we were calling last week the District 5 COVID working group. So I reached out to a lot of our community partners, health clinics, La Clinica, Native American Health Center, Roots Health Clinic, La Familia, a lot of the community groups, and we came together, and they are going to be supporting District 5 and maybe even all of OUSD in a testing regimen, because OUSD said they couldn't do it. And so I reached out to the community, and the community has the capacity to help OUSD get over this hurdle. So that's what I'm trying to do. And hopefully, maybe even today, we will have some MOUs in place to start providing testing at, I represent District 5. So starting with District 5 schools to have this regular testing in place, because as more news starts to get out this week, the district's testing has just about fallen apart this week.
Right.
And so this is my workaround. And an interesting side note is, after being told for weeks by OUSD staff and even other school board directors that we can't test more, we don't have staff, we can't. When I got the community groups together, not one of them said we can't.
Right.
All of them said, yes, we can help. We have tests and people in place. Let's go.
And
So
sorry, Mike.
no,
What
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say is that this just goes to how OUSD likes to think of itself, as a standalone, as a silo, in and of its to itself. And in fact, you know, all of our schools, like families from our communities, attend all of these schools, and that they sit in community with other people and other organizations and other services and within a city that functions that way. And so it just goes back to that same place where it's like, okay, well, we're just going to do it on our own and try to figure this out on your own. Like, the first thing I would have thought about was like, who's doing it and how do we get them in here? And if not, who do we hire to, bring on folks on? And so I really appreciate hearing your leadership around, contacting these community health clinics to figure that out, because they know how to do it. They know how to run the like drive-through testing. They know how to do this quickly too. And then turn around on the results quickly, because as much as the school district is educators, they're not healthcare providers. And so when I saw, like, of course, when I saw that my kid's test was screwed up, that the actual results of it won't come out. She didn't get tested until 5 days after exposure. The results didn't come 5 days after that. Made me just go, are we back at the beginning of this pandemic? Did we not learn anything at the beginning of when we were at the beginning? Remember when we were getting tested, y'all? Run down memory lane. Remember when we were getting tested in the beginning and it was like, you got to wait 10 days. You can't go anywhere because you're still waiting for your results to come through. That's what it's like at the school district. And it feels like there isn't a learning process or a learning curve to like what has already been done.
Yeah, it's a complete lack of preparation and planning. And really the district staff that are running the testing and the COVID response, they're not experts in these areas.
No.
Um, you know, Somebody who's a lawyer should not be managing a public health crisis. It's so it's kind of the good and the bad. You know, last week I was really encouraged with how the community groups really were willing to step in and step up. I had only reached out to a few, and our first meeting, we had a dozen groups on the call. And so, and I was able to plug them in directly with OUSD, where now not only hopefully can we get this testing in place, but this working group starts to be some of the knowledge base that will inform how we need to operate going forward. And so that was kind of last week, and
Mm-hmm.
we've jump started that, and that's in the works. This week, I need to do the same thing when it comes to distance learning, where I will be. I need to figure out which day, but I'm going to be convening a distance learning working group with parents, teachers, and students here in District 5, because we need to get relief for our distance learning so families have a true option. There's other problems with the distance learning besides guaranteeing a right to return to your in-person class. For
Mm-hmm.
in distance learning, we are not offering dual immersion, which is our Spanish language component for our
Right.
Spanish
Right.
families. For me in District 5, I have 3 dual immersion schools.
Right.
So the first thing, or one of the first things, is we need to demand that the district give a distance learning option for dual immersion programs also, to give our families that true option.
Right.
So I'm really disappointed in the leadership in the district that we are fighting over really bare minimums. When I first started bringing up a right to return to in-person and weekly testing 4 weeks ago, I didn't think this was going to be a fight. I thought I was just letting folks know behind closed doors, hey, we're missing some things for our plan. Let's put these in place. Here we are a month later, and we've had school board meetings moved to Zoom, games with resolutions and amendments, and just a refusal from leadership across the board, especially the other school board directors, to really come together and work on these things. And so what we have to do now is we as a community have to really gain back community control of our school district. You know, for me as a still newly elected school board director, this is why I ran for school board 3 times, was really to bring back community control. And as we are chipping away around these issues, what we're really doing is setting up community working groups and ways for community to demand accountability so we can start to direct these decisions. And in a way, it's sad and it's depressing, but I have not ever had an issue this easy to organize around, because it is so obvious to everyone that we need to put these bare minimums in place.
Right. I appreciate that. And I appreciate, Mike, this year has been so long that we forget that you only been in this role for 8 months.
Look, my life is like 4 different times during the pandemic already. Yeah,
Right.
it's been a world, and that's one of the other things that's really happening with OUSD also, is we have forgotten a lot about a lot of the core issues that we had with OUSD before the pandemic.
That's
You
right.
know, when the pandemic started and everyone sheltered into place, OUSD was experiencing about 9 months straight of protests at every school board meeting.
Right.
You know, the school board had used the police to attack us. They were regularly denying the community access.
Right.
And so even though we had some breakthroughs on the school board in the last election, we still have that culture. And here's the other thing that we're now seeing. You know, I serve on a school board where the 6 other school board directors never endorsed me, and I never endorsed any of them. And so I did not come into this with other school board directors kind of on our team or on my team. But a lot of different community groups, even Oakland Rising, have endorsed multiple candidates.
Be clear, Oakland Rising Action.
I'm
And
sorry, Oakland Rising
thank
Action.
you. Just to
And
be clear for
no, no, no.
everybody out there to know that it wasn't Oakland Rising. That's our C3, our C4 sister organization, Oakland Rising Action, which is a committee of folks. They did that endorsement.
Yes, I'm sorry. Oakland Rising Action endorsed some folk, and a lot of other community groups made different endorsements. One of the things that I think having me on the school board, and I also believe having Carol Fife on the city council, is it kind of resets the bar for our elected officials. And so the thing that I also need for folks, you know, I'm going to be putting out organizing calls, and people are going to start seeing we're going to really work on these issues, especially in District 5. But the other part of it that we have not learned how to do here in Oakland is how to hold our elected officials accountable. And so if anyone out there, if you endorsed any of the school board candidates, if your organization endorsed any of them, I need your help in holding them accountable. So this last vote over weekly COVID testing was 5-2. Director Williams was the only other school board director who supported my resolution and did not vote for this amendment that watered it down. That means if you have endorsed or your organization has endorsed any of those other 5 directors, I need you to be on them demanding answers for why they won't support weekly COVID testing at all of our school sites. Same for the distance learning part. The vote was 5-2. So, for example, if you endorsed Director Sam Davis in District 1, I need folks on him demanding answers for his vote and hopefully putting enough pressure on him where in the future he will vote with the community that elected him. And that is what, you know, I saw last week the birth of what an inside-outside strategy can really look like on the school board, where I have the ability to introduce things from the dais and get them on the agenda. But then we also need that strong community component of really organizing and pushing. That's how we got my resolutions agendized without all the votes.
You know, and to be very fair, Mike, like that's been a strategy that has been used often within OUSD. I mean, that's how Bob was able to help pass the George Floyd resolution. Right?
That was not that was not an inside-outside strategy.
It was an inside strategy because many organizations were working with some of the school board members and putting pressure on them. There was an accountability to that. So I'm gonna push back on you on that. That's all I'm gonna say.
There was not a school board director on that board who was supporting BOP or who had worked on the Peoples. And 5 months before that, the school board had refused to even vote to lower the number of officers by 3. So what really happened was that issue got lifted up, that campaign took fire, and all 7 of those school board members were pressured and their votes were changed. And I just want to point out this difference. This year, I introduced a resolution to bring these things forward. It was community pressure that forced President Gonzalez to agendize my 2 resolutions. It's a little bit different because before with police-free schools, there was no true advocate on the school board for those measures. So I just think it's a little bit different. But yes, we are. But let me say it in a more positive way. Yes. The breakthrough that BOP had with the George Floyd resolution was a watershed moment.
Yes.
And then we had these elections afterwards that capitalized off of that. The problem is now we've lost a little of that with COVID and with the shelter in place and those memories. But I see it as one stepping off of the other, off of the next. And so I don't want to get into the weeds too much. But this is I think the part that we all need to figure out is now that we're starting to get into more positions of power or elected officials that truly are a part of the community, how do we start to organize these things to get these tangible gains that we're all looking for?
That's right. I mean, I think that's the key, right? Is like for us to really think about what are the ways in which that we're working together. And so, you know, how are we bringing folks in the room to have those conversations so that we can push an inside outside strategy in a way that is really is holding accountable to the community. And I sometimes I get that piece around like people power and like us building an accountability base and people really pushing against the school board, and that there's an auspices on folks that are on the inside to see their work as accountable to someone else, right? That it isn't just solely you, Mike, on your own thinking up these thoughts, right? But that it's in conversation, it's in organizing the community. And that's a key piece to this, is like the role that you'll play to organize community and to see you organizing, service providers. I think that's a glimpse into what that could look like for our communities.
And
Um,
and and just the two things that I lifted up first, the weekly COVID testing and the right to return to your in-person school, it was also because that was what I was directly hearing from the community as the main concerns also. And again, I thought these were just going to be minor fixes behind the scenes, just tweaking the policy. I didn't realize that these were going to have to turn into full-fledged campaigns. Because let me just stress this
it's
point.
OUSD, Mike. Which you didn't know?
I it's still always surprising to me. Like honestly, it's surprising that this is where folks decided to dig in their heels around.
Right.
Because I really want to stress this point. We need so much more than just the right to return to your in-person school and weekly COVID testing. We need to really have real procedures in place. We need to have a high quality distance learning option. And so hopefully we can get past these initial hurdles, but we really need, more than anything else, we need to raise the bar and demand better. And at this point, excuses are not acceptable. We have hundreds of millions of dollars left in COVID relief. These dollars were specifically given to OUSD to provide these services during this time. And we have to demand that they're put in place because the community just needs whatever resources we can get right now.
That's right. So what are the ways that people can get in touch with you, Mike? I need to close out because I have another meeting in about 5 minutes. But how do
So,
they get in touch with you? How do they support? What are the ways in which people can show up?
so my school board email is mike.hutchinson, HUTCHINSON @OUSD.org. That is my school board email. Our next school board meeting is September 8th. And then there's always other school board meetings. For example, tomorrow night at 6 is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, which I'm on that committee, and that's another good place to engage. If you are in District 5, there will be a gathering this week. I'm sorry, I'll get the date out, to really start talking about how do we improve our distance learning option. And what I want everyone to do is to weigh in and get engaged. There can be lots of different ways now, whether it's emailing the school board and the superintendent, or checking in with your school to see if there's ways to support directly with your school. We have other issues where it seems to be our schools are the only places where in-person is being demanded. So I need help from the community in demanding that the school board hold meetings in person, that senior district staff has to attend in person so they are there to provide the services that they're contracted to provide. We need all of this help and support. And more than anything, I need everyone to spread the word to the community. My biggest fear is that folks who are not paying attention will not be fully informed to make the best decisions for their families. Everyone needs to have the information to make the best decisions for their families to keep them safe through this pandemic. And that's kind of, to me, the most important thing. So the last thing is we need to really, in OUSD, demand more transparency and better communication. Our families need to know what's happening, and then we need to support the community in driving the decisions through this crisis. And we have to recognize this is a specific crisis. This is a worldwide pandemic, and we don't have great options. So we are going to have to collectively work to have the best options that we can possible.
Well, I appreciate all of that, Mike, and I hope we can get an update on it soon. And just to let everybody else know too, is that the city of Oakland is thinking about shutting down some Head Start locations in East Oakland, and so this is going to directly impact Black and Brown communities and Black,
Yeah.
early education providers, and so Head Start teachers, and so really. Look out for that because there's going to be a special city council meeting on it on Wednesday But we'll be putting out an e-blast about it tomorrow, so you can get more information. Follow Parent Voices Oakland to find out some more information. And next week, Monday is a holiday, but Tuesday we're hoping to have our Monday meals be a Tuesday lunch special, so that we'll be talking about it there then. So join us next week. Check us out. Follow Mike Hutchinson, District 5 School Board Director. Thanks, Mike. Have a good day.
Thank you.